Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin, I'd like to make some acknowledgements. First of all, to thank Terry for the invitation, Dr. Pachari, the board of Terry, members of staff of Terry, for allowing me this opportunity once again to participate in this forum. Last year I had the privilege of doing so, and that was before Copenhagen. I came away from that last meeting with a lot of expectations. I will tell you later what I come away, my feelings after coming away from Copenhagen. But before doing so, let me also take this opportunity to thank the Prime Minister of India for the inspiring comments which he made in the opening statement this morning. I was particularly touched by his reference to the special place that small island states have and should have as being the most vulnerable. I also welcome the commitment made by India to the post-Copenhagen process. I think it is important that we try to work beyond Copenhagen in a much more positive environment. My statement will be really a summary of my written statement, otherwise it would take too long. We have agreed that we would speak to our statements rather than bore you for the next 10 to 12 minutes with a long statement. Around this year, last year, I was privileged to participate in this meeting. Later in the year, in September, I also had the opportunity to participate at the United Nations Summit on Climate Change. Following the discussions at that summit, I came away very optimistic that there might indeed be positive outcome at Copenhagen. What happened at Copenhagen turned out to be quite different. The outcome was quite a lot less than I, and I'm sure many other leaders, expected. It was my view that the debate in Copenhagen ended up revolving around two principal issues. One, acting in the collective interest of humankind, or acting to protect the interest of the individual nations. It was very clear at Copenhagen and following Copenhagen that there remains a wide gap in positions between different countries. And if we are to hope to get some kind of a resolution at Mexico, then it is important that we recognize this and that we discuss this wide disparity of positions. I believe this was the mistake we made at Copenhagen, that we could come to Copenhagen with our separate positions and come away with those separate positions being agreed to. It was unrealistic, and it would never happen. Therefore, the message that I would like to leave at this conference is that let us allow ourselves room to maneuver. Let us allow ourselves, with our very different positions, our very diverse interests, we must take the opportunity to dialogue rather than to continue to negotiate. It was my belief that at the summit meeting at Copenhagen, we were simply carrying on the negotiations that ended up in failure at Barcelona. If we are to have any hope for success, we must review this process and come to Mexico with a slightly different approach. I would like to make the point that in the international arena, we do not have a single authority to regulate the behavior of groups or individuals as we do in our national settings. And what happens as a result? We as individual nations exercise our sovereignty, and we take it to the international arena. And we come to these, and we come away maintaining our individual national positions. I believe that if we are to have any kind of success in regulating or attending to the problem of climate change, then we must accept the reality that there has to be a single regulatory authority. I know that And I believe that what actions we take in our individual countries does quite often have a bearing or impact on our next door neighbors, and quite often on our very distant neighbors. Climate change is such an issue, and I think we must realize this. And we cannot believe that we, as individual nations, can continue to exercise our sovereign rights in respect to greenhouse gas emissions. Because unfortunately, I wish, or we wish, you could keep your own greenhouse gases. But unfortunately, you do not. So in this context, it is important that there must be a broader authority. And this is why I believe, and many countries believe, that there must be a legally binding agreement. In the absence of a legally binding agreement, only moral obligations can be exercised. But how effective are those likely to be? So I believe this is the challenge that is ahead of us, and I believe this is the challenge we must tackle here today if we are to have any success at Copenhagen. In conclusion, I would like to state quite clearly that Kiribati, at 2 meters above sea level average height, is one of the most vulnerable countries. And there is no doubt in my mind that without any international action on climate change, without any agreement at the international level on climate change, we will be underwater in the years ahead of us. Already we are experiencing very extreme erosion. What we experienced in the past are quite different from what we are experiencing in the more recent past. And just before I came out, last week during the last high tide, during the full moon, our communities were suffering because we had to go and visit them because the seawater was coming into their homes and they've had to be moved. And so these are the realities that I want to share with you that we can share the solution. And without sharing the solution, there is no hope of success. With these comments, ladies and gentlemen, I leave the challenge as something that we must all share here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.